Have you taken a look at the price of milk or cheese or butter lately? Well, hold on, because a new report from Rabobank suggests those prices are facing a major shakeup. And today, we're going to dig into exactly why. So, what's going on here? Why is the global price of milk at such a crossroads? I mean, it seems like a simple product, right? But believe it or not, right now, it's caught in this massive economic tug of war between two really powerful opposing forces. Okay, so here is the absolute heart of the issue. On one side, you've got supply just surging, with farmers producing a whole lot of milk. But on the other side, global demand is, well, it's getting weaker. And it's this fundamental imbalance that's driving this entire story. So let's start with the supply side of things, what we're calling the Great Milk Boom. To really get what's happening to prices, first, we've got to understand why farmers are suddenly producing so much of it. It turns out it's basically a perfect storm of good news for dairy farms. I mean, margins are looking great, so they're actually making good money. Feed costs pretty much under control. Their herds are finally recovering from some tough health issues. And hey, even the weather has been mostly playing along. So what does all that good news add up to? Well, the result is a projected increase of 7.1 million metric tons of milk, and that's over just 2 years. That is a tidal wave of new supply that's about to crash into the global market. And if you want a perfect example of this, just to look at the United States. Production there jumped by 3.4% year over year in July 2025. That's its fastest growth rate since 2021. And when a huge player like the US speeds up like that, it sends a massive signal to the rest of the world. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. This quote from the report pretty much says it all. The great challenge for the sector is not production, but global demand. In other words, making the milk, that's not the problem. The real problem is finding someone to buy it all. And that brings us to the other side of this whole equation, and honestly, the much bigger challenge, the vanishing buyer. So yeah, where has all the demand actually gone? Well, the reasons are pretty complex, and they're happening all over the globe. A huge piece of the puzzle is that consumption in China, which is a massive dairy importer, is way down. On top of that, you've got food inflation hitting everyone's wallets, forcing people to cut back. Restaurants and food service, they're seeing less traffic. And then in places like the US, things like labor uncertainty are also putting a real damper on spending. Okay, so you have this tension, right? High supply, low demand. So how is this all playing out in different parts of the world? Let's take a quick trip around the globe to see which regions are really on the edge. First up, let's head to Argentina. Man, after a really rough 2024, their dairy sector has had an incredible comeback. Production is up a staggering 12% year over year in just the first half of 2025. What that means is a key South American exporter is officially back in the game, and they're adding a ton to that global surplus. Now, let's hop over to the European Union. At first glance, the growth looks pretty modest, right? Just 0.3%. But you cannot let that tiny number fool you. We're talking about the EU here. Given the sheer size of that market, even a small percentage increase, led by countries like Ireland and Poland, adds a colossal amount of milk to the global pool. But it's not a boom everywhere, and this is an important contrast. Look at Australia. While other places are surging, Australian production is actually under a lot of pressure because of drought and a smaller herd size. So this shows you that it's a regional thing, but the massive increases we're seeing elsewhere are just completely dwarfing the shortfalls here. So you've got this massive wave of production crashing right into this wall of weak demand. When that happens, there's really only one inevitable outcome. And this brings us to a key term you're going to want to know: exportable surplus. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's simply the amount of dairy, all that milk, cheese, butter, that's left over for other countries to buy after a country has met its own needs. And right now, that surplus is getting bigger and bigger. And listen, this isn't just a quick blip on the radar. The forecast here is absolutely critical. It shows that this global surplus is expected to keep growing for six consecutive quarters. We're talking all the way from the middle of 2025 straight through to the end of 2026. This is a sustained long-term trend. So what's the bottom line in all of this? Well, the report's main conclusion is crystal clear. This growing pile of surplus dairy is going to put some serious downward pressure on global prices, and it's going to last right through 2026. It's basic economics, right? More supply plus less demand almost always means lower prices. And that leaves us with this really fascinating paradox to chew on.
I mean, we're constantly hearing about rising food costs and inflation, right? So, in a world where food prices are going up, how can having too much of a staple, like milk, a surplus, actually be the problem? It's a question that really gets to the heart of our incredibly complex and sometimes totally contradictory global food system.